If you're making music in 2026 like me, you've got a problem that producers 20 years ago would die for. Infinite choice. Tools like Cubase, Ableton, Logic give you thousands of plugins and thousands of samples, a massive collection of VSTs, inserts, loads of stuff that you've barely touched. And for years, this was a big problem for me. I'd spend more time auditioning how plugins sound than actually writing music. I was a tourist in my own studio, constantly chasing the next piece of gear, and ended up sounding like a low-rent version of everyone else. I was fairly proficient, but I wasn't Mitekiss. The tracks were okay, clean, but the soul was missing. And the trick that finally broke me out of that cycle wasn't finding the killer plugin, it was removing the options. Think about your favorite drum and bass, garage from late 90s, early noughties. Go and look back at the iconic studios of the time. They had limits, man. Maybe there were 2 reverbs, 2 compressors. It forced producers to become masters of what they had available to them. Masters of their 1 EQ, their 1 delay. My journey from starting out at 12, having a publishing deal at 16, that didn't work out, signing to the biggest drum and bass label in the world, releasing 2 albums, taught me that the struggle to find your signature sound never really stops. The difference between a bedroom producer and a full-time artist is often not the gear, but the discipline to use the same gear the same way until it becomes truly unique to you. That limitation is a creative filter that we need to bring back. The modern solution, building your palette. So the trick I thought about was to actively build my own analog limit in the digital world. I forced myself to limit the EQs, the reverbs, and the synths that I use. That combined all together create that foundation of the melancholic textural sound that I crave. Right, so we're in Cubase 15. You could do this in any DAW. I'm not gonna debate which DAWs are better or which are worse. I'm not 12, 1, and 2, I don't care. They're all the same, they're just different colors with different buttons, but ultimately they do the same thing. And one way of building your own palette is to like use the same drums, like you had a drum kit in the studio, almost. But for example, drums I've used throughout the years in certain tunes that I've reused that I really like, I have saved into a folder. And one way to make it really easy for you is just to build your own kit. So here, hopefully you can hear that, kick 1, we would just slowly build out, say, 16 kick drums on that bank, and then on my bank 2, I might have 16 snares, and so on and so on. And every time I'm writing drum and bass, I will come back and use one of these kicks or a combination of these kicks. And you know, obviously, like say you've got something like this, the beauty is here, we can maybe like tune it so it's more in key with whatever song we're working on. Again, I'm not going to go into teacher mode, I'm just talking about building a palette. And you know, talking of plugins, like I said earlier, limiting yourself to maybe 1 or 2 of each type just so you can really learn them and start to hone your sound. And I think like you've got to try a few to see what you get on with and what you like the sound of. For me, like this compressor here, this little tube comp by Universal Audio, this LA2A rep, I really like this. I think it's great. So I'd have something like that on my rack. And the beauty of Cubase here is you can create collections. So for example, default is everything, and it's just overwhelming amount of plugins. But I've created a little rack here, super limited. And you might create different ones. It might just have like a drum rack, for example. And then I've got, you know, Fab Filter Pro Q4, a fantastic, fantastic EQ that I use all the time. I don't need more than this one EQ really, to be honest. What else we've got in there? Timeless 3, which again, Pro Q, incredible delay unit. I love this. I pretty much use this one exclusively. Then I've got the Valhalla Vintage Reverb. This is the only reverb I really use as well, to be honest. And then I got my clipper here, which I use to clip drums, by Kazrog K-Clip 3 this is. Absolutely fantastic. It's just an example. You might want to build out a few more than this. You might want some effects and other stuff. You know, there might be a few other essentials that you need to include, or tools like, for example, ST4B multi-band transient shaper. That I think is amazing on breaks, I must say. But you know, this is going to look different for everyone. I don't think everyone should have the same plugins, or there isn't a be all and end all. Most of them do the same thing. It's more about tone, character, what you get on with. And when I have a drum bus, I only ever use 1 rack, and I have it saved here as my final bus. It doesn't change. These are the set of plugins that I always use, so I can always build up that sound on my drums. And I'll just quickly show you some of them. So I'm using Magneto by Cubase for just a tiny little bit of saturation. Barely anything, barely moves the needle, right? I'm using a little bit of soothe. Often I'll drop this mix right down here just to get rid of any kind of digital sharpness in sample breaks and whatever else. It's good for that. Then I've got the Focusrite console, which effectively I'm barely touching. I'm using it almost for noise. I find the EQ on this quite nice as well, though, to be fair. Then I've got my clipper, as you saw earlier, running. At the very end of the chain, I've just got some EQ, and I'll run this on linear phase, high grade, just to roll off that rumble, and that very, very, very top. And then just before that, I've got the gangster of all plugins, the Silver Bullet, which, like I said earlier, is an analog saturation, effectively emulation. Long story, this plugin, look it up. So I suppose this is my point. My drums always go through this rack. It's like it was here. You know, I don't dilly-dally between different ones. I want to learn these and become really good at them. And I don't change it very often. And a big part of this, you know, is that I'm eliminating any kind of decision fatigue. I'm not spending 20 minutes choosing the delay. The delay is already chosen. The only thing left to focus on is emotion, vibe, texture, the important stuff. So, you know, now when I'm creating, I'm not thinking, what delay should I use? I'm thinking, how does that make my listeners feel? How does it make me feel? And that constrained workflow is what finally let me find the sound that has led to over 10 million streams and landed my music in things like Forza Horizon, Samsung adverts, EastEnders. They're all me. They're all my limited palette. Conclusion. So the trick was not a secret EQ setting or a killer plugin. It was the realization that choice is the enemy of creativity. Look, I'm not here to teach you how to EQ, how to use a compressor. I make beats. I am not a teacher, and I don't want to pretend to be. I want to just document the struggle of making music for beat makers, the struggle of finding your sound. And you know, if you're feeling creatively stuck, don't buy another VST. Go build a custom sound palette. And then sit down and ask yourself, how can I make this single, simple tool sound like the entire universe? Look, if you like this philosophy, this way of thinking, this way of creating, hit the like button. Do me a favor, subscribe. Let me know in the comments what your single go-to plugin is, the one you'd never delete, the one you feel like makes you sound like you. And yeah, follow along for more of the independent artist journey. Peace, till the next one.